What is a premise and why is it important in writing?
I think the premise is the idea you're trying to tell in that point of view that you have. Because ideas can be repeated so many times, right? But it's your take on that material. So again, we were talking about Juno earlier, right? And that story has been told so many times, that girl who gets pregnant. But the premise of that was beyond that, it was this teenage girl that gets pregnant and has all of this family, and she doesn't want to have an abortion. She wants to give the baby up for adoption, right? So that is their take and their point of view. They have a vision. So the premise of your story is really what sets the basis, but then it's about how you develop that into a fleshed out story. So a lot of times when I'm, consulting on scripts, I can tell them your premise is good, your story kind of falters. So you have a good setup of an idea. What you have here has legs, or there's a seed of an idea. Your premise is there. It's just the way you approached it is not working because of different things. It can be the structure, or the protagonist is not fleshed out enough, so we're not seeing an evolution or things like that, But that premise is the first step that needs to be there. It's your point of view and how you're telling the story you're telling.
Why is it hard to find a new take in this day and age? I mean, is it true that everything's already been written?
I don't think that absolutely everything has been written, but yes, so much has been written before. But if you can find a new take on old material, I think that makes it fresh. We've seen a lot of those things lately. For example, Maleficent, that's a new take. We hadn't seen that story from the point of view of the villain. Obviously, you couldn't just go write that if you don't own the rights. But that's a good example to see on how a new take on something that's been told so many times before can make the material feel completely fresh. So this is common, especially with television, I would say. Let's say medical shows or lawyer shows, police shows, all of the procedurals. There's so many that come out every single year, right? And audiences like them, so they work. We all like to watch the different medical shows, the different lawyer shows, the different police shows. But it's the new take that it's going to make them unique. If you just write another medical show without a fresh take, then it won't make it past the desk of anyone, because those are a dozen, like there's so many out there. But for example, if you go with The Good Doctor, right? That's a fresh take on a surgical show because the protagonist has autism. That makes that show unique because the protagonist is different, as someone we had not seen before. For example, if you're talking about lawyer shows, Suits was a great new show because it was about a lawyer who wasn't actually a lawyer. He lied his way in because he had a photographic memory, so he pretends to be a lawyer where he actually never attended law school. The Good Wife is another example because it's about a housewife who was a lawyer 15 years ago, left to be a mom, basically, and then had to go back after her husband had an affair and she had to support her family. Those are new takes on material we've seen a million times before, like these shows that come out every year, but that makes them fresh. So if you can find the new take, the new way of telling a story, in cop shows, for example, Homeland did that, We had never seen a protagonist of a show like that was in the CIA or FBI or something like that had bipolar disorder. That was fresh. That made that show unique. Or for example, Sons of Anarchy. The world of that story is what made it so unique. We had never seen a show about bikers on TV. That's a fresh take on a family story because that's a show all about family. But the background made it feel fresh because we hadn't seen that on television, and that made it appealing. So if you can find that, you can make your story unique because yes, it's hard to find new stories. And I know how much writers struggle with that every day because so much is out there. And that's why, again, you can't copyright just an idea because they're all out there. It's just the way you tell it. Your take on the material is what's going to make it fresh and what's going to make it unique, and your voice and how you tell it.
How does a writer know they have a bad premise?
I don't think writers realize it, so they probably need the notes. And that's where a script consultant would come in, just letting you know, your premise is just not strong enough. maybe you need to find a new take or you need a new angle on the story. That's where I always say notes are important. And it can't just be, your best friend that doesn't know about story. It's good, to start with the basics. Sometimes you swap scripts with other writers, things like that. You start getting ideas and stories from, like notes on your stories and things like that. But if you really want to assess your script, I think that consulting with someone who can really give you a real assessment of like the marketability or how your take would be seen by producer or someone like that, that's where you should reach out to someone, with more experience in that sense, that can tell you, your story is not really working because your premise is not strong enough. You don't have enough to tell this story because it's too bland, or there's not enough conflict, or it's just been told too many times and you haven't found a fresh take on it.
This is going to be a little strange, but should someone consult more than one person? Because what if someone's, for lack of a better term, a poisonous pen mate, and they kind of want to smash the person, whether it's a friend, whether it's a person in a class? I mean, this reality that exists. If someone's told by someone that their story isn't really strong and there's a million reasons why, how much should they believe it and how much should they think, I'm being sabotaged? What if they're not and it's really just not a good story? When do they know?
I think that you should definitely consult more than one person. And I myself, as a consultant, have told clients, we've consulted enough on the script. I think that you should reach out to someone else, and I give them ideas of who they could talk to so they can keep working on it. Or sometimes, you don't connect with the material, but you know that there could be someone that can make that script better. And you see it happen all the time, especially with TV shows. You hear the stories about writers, Mad Men was written like, I think 10 years before it actually made it to the air, and it kept getting rejected and things like that, So yes, I always say I'm a consultant. This is my opinion on your story, but I'm not the one and only person that can tell you this works or this doesn't work or your story has no value. I feel like you should consult with others. The same way, you get notes from different people and the notes differ. We were talking earlier about how I like to get the notes that people have given my clients and kind of like put them together in a more cohesive way, because sometimes the notes are very different. There are services out there that offer coverage that offer you more than one reader. And I think those are great because you get different perspectives on the script and you can see the note behind the note, as I call it. So sometimes people can tell you, this is not working for me or this is not working for me, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to follow their suggestion. It's just you should look behind that note and see why that area is not working for people. You could find a different approach and how to fix that issue. You don't have to necessarily follow. That's why I always say I'm giving suggestions. I'm not telling you do this with your script or do this thing, I'm just kind of illuminating the different areas that are not fully working and giving you ideas on what could make them work. Sometimes the writer finds an even better way of making them work than I had even imagined, But it's just about pointing out those different things. So I think that approaching more than one consultant is always good because it's going to elevate your writing even more.